This is Coder Radio, episode 305 for April 16th, 2018. Hi everyone, and welcome to Coder Radio, Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly talk show, taking a pragmatic look at the art and business of software development and its related technologies. This episode is brought to you by our two fine sponsors, DigitalOcean and Linux Academy. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. My name is Chris, but what's more important is our host. He's perched, established, and ready to go over in the bayous of Florida. It's Mr. Dominic. Hello, Mike!
I want Szechuan sauce. I want that Mulan 1990s Clinton era Szechuan sauce.
Have you tried it?
Yes, I have actually.
Yeah, it's all right. It's okay. Well,
this is gonna be a good episode.
Mr. Dominic, we had a lot of follow-up to get into from last week, but we're gonna kind of do something different with it. Instead of just reading emails, we're gonna have it inspire a couple of things in the show for the next couple of weeks, including we're gonna do a little bit of historical deep dive into Big Blue this week, just to sort of set up another conversation we're gonna have in a couple of weeks, and the early dominance that IBM had, and the fight they had in the 80s, and then we'll get into a more modern hoopla that involves your current workflow. But why don't we start out with some emails that came into the show. Are you ready, good sir, for the feedback?
I'm ready like a dime store hooker.
Okay, all right, I can't ask for more than that. So,
and somebody calls right on that dot.
You know, the thing is, I'd pay for you. I think it'd be money well spent. I got to be honest, it'd be money well spent.
That's the nicest thing anyone said to me.
So we got an email that said, "Hey guys, keep an eye on Swift Playgrounds." Remember, you said that the canary in the coal mine. Or I said the canary in the coal mine for Apple switching to ARM processors would be when Xcode starts coming out for the iOS platform. And a couple of emails pointed this out, but I like this one. He says, you know, look, this is where it's going to go. Swift Playgrounds is going to grow up into an Xcode replacement. It also means that Apple would have to create a layer much like art to make sure that people don't brick their iPads. Then Mike can finally preach the iPad Pro Bible once again. What do you think? iPad Pros with like a grown-up version of Swift Playground, sort of like Final Cut came out of iMovie?
I mean, that is like a certain version of Lovecrafting. Yeah, a couple of people write that in. I don't know. I don't think that's the case. I could be wrong.
I hope not. I mean, Playground should really stay focused.
Well, it's not even that Playground should stay focused. It's, you know, the more dev I do, the more I realize I need all the toys. Right? Like, this is not a minimalist paradise here. This is a bring me all the toys.
What do you mean by toys?
Like, you know what? Sometimes a Mac is the right tool. Sometimes a Linux system is the right tool. And sometimes a Windows 10 machine is the right tool. I can't, and all three of those are like actually powerful systems. I can't imagine coding on an iPad and doing my day-to-day workflow on that without like being filled with a rage that could consume 1,000 suns.
Yeah, well, don't think of today's tools. Think of, 5-10 years of iteration where you've got, different smart keyboards now.
Like, okay, what is an iPad when I hook it to a mechanical keyboard? Is it even still an iPad?
Maybe not. I mean, maybe not. Yeah.
So then we're talking like a Surface, right? Which, yes, I think is a fine dev machine. So.
Okay, good. All right. Well, moving on.
Did there? Yeah.
Esteban says, go with your gut. He wrote in with a couple of emails, but I really like this point he made. He says, forget about the nice songs and poems about following your heart. Your heart can and will mislead you, but your gut always feels right. Your gut's always right.
I agree.
Go with
and here's your problem with the heart. My heart was with the language. You might be familiar with this, Chris. I don't know if you know this. In 2014, something happened. There was this language called Objective-C.
Here we go again.
Yes.
Here we go.
And then my heart was carved out like I'm a deer on the side of the road, rather swiftly, one might say.
Oh,
bitter.
That was good.
See what I did there?
Yeah,
that was next.
That was pretty.
Well done, Esteban. your feedback is the best only because you set me up for another hit at Swift.
We also had a pretty good point on the subreddit. Just really not. I don't know if maybe not pretty good point might not be the way to put it, but we got a feedback. Well, because it wasn't really a point; it was just an observation. On our episode last week, no bad guys, only survivors. Coda Radio 304, and ND writes, it was a really valuable lesson for him. He says he went back and re-listened to certain chapters a couple of times, and he really felt like it was a great reflection on how to sort of understand failure, learn from failure, which he's also been able to use as a contractor. So he says, I also enjoyed your recent forays into being shocked that PowerShell is a thing. He's talking about me there. Yeah. But like that we went down to Microsoft and talked to them and got that story. So he was covering a couple of bits here, but he says, I really found it informative and useful specifically today because he has had to deal with the other end of empty promises of enterprise software salespeople for years now. And he says crossing the chasm is definitely on his reading list. So it was great to be able to, so for somebody who's on the other side of the contract agreement that, you know, we often like sort of proverbially talk about, it was super useful for him to hear insights into the other side of the argument. So I thought that was pretty cool. And KTO
a lot of people really like that episode, which makes me feel bad for all of you, really.
You just have to burn things down from time to time and replant a forest and then share the lessons learned.
Thank you. You beat me to it. Our cousins Uncle Jay and of course Bane. Very similar philosophy.
Oh man. I've started watching this. Have you heard of Alex Inc?
I have not.
It's not that great. It's not that great, but it's an ABC sitcom starring what's his face from Scrubs. The main guy from Scrubs, and he's a mid-30s father who quits his full-time job to launch a podcast network, and it's
does this hurt a little bit, Chris?
It is awkward. It's because I'm watching it with my kid, and I'm like, that is kind of like what life is like. And it's funny to watch something that you do, because I know developers, see, I'm not even going to resonate with developers because this has been common with development for a long time, but nobody in the mainstream has really talked about podcasting for decades, for as long as it's been around, a decade. And now all of a sudden there's a TV show about it. Pandora's launching podcasting support. It's really something to be sort of just sitting here watching all of a sudden this industry just, I don't know,
blossom, really.
Or like enter the next level of consumer awareness. You know, like it's reached another section of it's moved on from the early adopters.
See, I never understood why podcasting. I mean, this has nothing to do with the topic of the show, but let's just go into it because I'm bored. Why podcasting isn't just treated as like an extension of AM radio. Like I used to love AM radio. I mean, before Imus was an asshole, I used to listen to Imus in the morning, right? When I lived in New Jersey when I was younger, there was you remember, Chris, I mean, I'm sure they still exist. You have the local stations, right? You have like your, Washington State Wheat Smokers 101.am. We had a 101.5 in New Jersey, right? And you get like the local feel.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And then you're right. So why do I'm obsessed with you being a drug addict, by the way.
Yeah, you know me, I'm a huge druggie. Yeah, all these drugs I did.
All these years. But why don't people see it as an extension of like talk radio? Seriously, because in my mind, that's exactly what it is. Like I'm wearing over-the-head headphones that are cushy and hot, and my ears are literally on fire right now because I live in the goddamn jungle. And I'm using a microphone that looks like a swollen penis.
It's huge, yeah. Yeah, that is a particularly phallic microphone you have.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's black. It's not good. Like, there's a lot wrong with my setup, but we've gone down a path. Anyway, why do you think podcasting is not treated just like an extension of AM radio?
Well, because it's sort of a no-rules medium, and it's such a varying degree of quality. It's a lot like software development in that regard. Like there's some great software developers and there's some horrible software developers. And I think also just the sort of homebrew nature of it. That's changing though. I think that is going to change as now you've got all of these major radio networks that are releasing podcasts, and maybe it will start to be seen as that.
Well, I have to say, like the Wall Street Journal just recently redid theirs and they've upped their game. Yeah, and so is the New York Times. It sucks in a way, but then at the same time, we got to up our game. Always got to be up on our game. Well, listen, put on the video stream, and I'll just take my shirt off.
There we go. Boom. Boom. Yep.
Got it.
That and mud wrestling. Those are the 2 top requests that come into the show.
You know what? I've seen some great beards and some plump Linux developers. I would love to see Linux developer.
I don't know, man. All that mud in those beards, that just, it's a nightmare for me. That just triggers me. All right, well, we do have a topic today to get into, and it's kind of an important one, so we shouldn't run people off because it's going to be setting up the next couple of weeks of shows. So before we dive in, let's do our first bit of duty and business and thank the fantastic folks over at DigitalOcean, do.co/coder. Now, let me double check here. Getting out the prop piece of paper that I have. Yes, verified with the back office staff. There is no S on that do.co/coder. You go there to sign up for DigitalOcean, simplicity at scale, and you'll get a $100 DigitalOcean credit. Did you hear that? $100 in DigitalOcean credit. It's a limited time offer, so I want you to take advantage of it while they're still giving it out. do.co/coder. DigitalOcean is incredibly fast infrastructure on demand. You can get spun up in less than 55 seconds. Every single DigitalOcean droplet, from the 3 cents an hour, which is my favorite, or even cheaper than that, to the super expensive hundreds gigabytes of RAM, massive Xeon CPUs, everything in that entire lineup, SSDs, all of it. 40 gigabit connections into the hypervisors, all of it. Great, beautiful, easy to use dashboard on all of it, and a straightforward, well-documented, full-featured API that you can start programming against, take advantage of existing libraries, or open source code that's been completely designed and built for you. DigitalOcean has predictable pricing, entire application stacks that are ready to go, and you can also deploy a base system if you like. You combine all of that with fantastic documentation and their new flexible droplets. For $15 a month, you can mix and match resources the most appropriate for your application. Or, I mentioned it, they have those really high-end Xeon CPUs for CPU-optimized droplets. If you have a really compute-intensive workload, very, very useful for that. And then on top of that, for storage, they have Spaces and Object Storage. Spaces is S3 compatible, and Object Storage just shows up as another device right on your rig. That's so sweet because it's great for backups, it's great for centralizing storage, it's great for adding new disk if you have something that's growing on your existing droplet. And recently they've adjusted their prices. So if you've been a DigitalOcean customer for a while, you can go upgrade your system for free. Pay exactly what you're paying now, and you just get more RAM, more disk, more CPU. do.co/coder. Go to DigitalOcean, try it out with a $100 credit. do.co/coder. All right, Mr. Dominic, you tweeted something that it kind of stuck with me because you did this on towards the beginning of the month. I'm still thinking about it. You said, I've read this twice now, and I'm absolutely convinced that Microsoft is becoming the platonic ideal of IBM that I mentioned a few weeks ago in Coder Radio. And then you include a link to the resignation of one of Microsoft's long-term engineers who, after 21 years, was leaving. And you said the platonic version of IBM. And when we were talking about Sun Microsystems on the show, we sort of got a new appreciation for how important some of this backstory of the tech industry is to really kind of understand where it's going. And we danced around IBM a lot when we were talking about Sun. And then we danced around IBM a lot when we started talking about Microsoft again. So I thought maybe this would be the week we hit the pause button and we just do kind of what I'm going to call a high-level deep dive. So the important bits about IBM that we need to know for the wider context of our future discussions, with a little just background history, and maybe even take a moment and go to sort of IBM's real peak over the PC industry in the early to mid '80s. Are you a complicit co-host in my schemes here? Do you think this is something worth doing?
Listen, let's put on our black suits with white shirts and let's make sure we have high socks. Let's go to IBM.
Yeah. You know, just to kind of give you, we're going to talk about IBM's influence over tech, but IBM really kind of had big influence over the way employment works in the US. I don't know if it's true, but they definitely, IBM says it's true, that they pioneered the 40-hour work week and group health benefits in a company. That's a pretty big claim if that's true. And IBM technically got started in 1911 when they leased unit record equipment and were famous for creating punch cards. In fact, they really became the Computing Tabulating Recording Company, CTR, until an individual named Thomas J. Watson took over in 1924 and renamed them to International Business Machines, or IBM. And so let's go back to sort of IBM's origins, a sort of a quick overview. This is a quote, or I'm sorry, a clip that I grabbed from a 1985's broadcast of the Computer Chronicles. Now, to take you up to speed, in 1985, IBM had just recently wrapped up a potential monopoly lawsuit with the federal government. They were trying to push for a new expansion card format, and there's a lot of discussions about white label BIOS development. And so at this point in time, the Computer Chronicles goes back and looks at IBM's origins.
In many respects, the history of IBM is the history of computing. The parent company's founder, Herman Hollerith, devised the first practical card punch calculator. It was used for the first time to tabulate the 1890 American census. The IBM card soon became the symbol of the early computer age. IBM's first mainframe, the Mark I, ushered in the post-war era of data processing, for the most part restricted to scientific applications. But IBM's choice market was always business, especially big business. As advances in memory and storage took place, they were applied and promoted for business use. In this manner, the company developed an almost exclusive hold on the data processing departments of major corporations. By the 1960s, IBM was the leader both technically and commercially, with over two-thirds of the mainframe market. Its pervasive customer support and computer families gave it a major advantage in almost every aspect of business computing. By 1966, the company began to look at the small business market and expanded overseas. Today, suddenly cleared of its history-making antitrust suit, IBM continues to expand its share of the market, and it does so in the same way it has in the past, secretively, cautiously, and with ruthless efficiency.
They didn't really have a clear picture of how IBM was ever going to be supplanted. They were so dominant that here was an interview that took place right after that clip plays in the Computer Chronicle, and listen to the resignation in their voices. It's just a foregone conclusion.
Norm, IBM saw some opportunities here a few years ago and jumped right in and took the lion's share of the PC market. Do you see any effective competition now, or are we all going to be working toward being compatible with IBM?
Well, Gary, in 1984, we saw IBM capture 26% of the worldwide PC market, and we at DataQuest expect that that market share will continue to increase through our forecast period, which ends in 1989. I would certainly expect they would command 40 to 50% of the market by that point in time.
So, I mean, you really get an idea of how dominant IBM was in the PC market, which is a market they don't even play in anymore. They don't even bother anymore. I think it's kind of remarkable that transition where they go from how could anybody ever replace them? That was the IBM. They were so dominant, right? And now they're more thought of like cloud services and enterprise services and mainframe still, but it's in a lot of ways where Microsoft is in their world of the compute little kingdom. Amazon's in their world of the compute kingdom. They own all of that. Like now we have lots of little IBMs. It feels like baby IBMs, mini IBMs, where they don't have unilateral influence, but they sure have a lot of influence in the section of the galaxy they own. What do you think? Is that fair?
I think it's fair, right? I mean, I think IBM really... It's interesting to think about how long they've been around, right? And how much has, can we say, changed since they've been around?
Mm-hmm. No, they're still around.
Well, they're, I mean, of course they're still around. They're a big player in AI. And,
but since 1911, over 100 years ago, things have changed.
Right. I mean, I like to think of IBM in terms of the ThinkPad in their more recent history. Sure. And at some point, it became just not worth it for them to actually manufacture their own computers. Which is a little sad.
It is, and it's really telling. So now, though, even despite that, the company's taking in about $100 billion a year and has around 450,000 employees still. So they didn't go away, and I think that's maybe a key lesson that when we start talking about where Microsoft is going, if you get to a certain dominance, I don't think you quite go away. Like Sun never reached that. They never reached the level of influence that IBM or a Microsoft or a Google has. Whereas, I think once you get to a certain scale, a certain size, unless you're acquired, you just never really go away. You still have a certain customer base you're going to serve for our lifetime, is what I suspect. So when you say the platonic version of IBM, do you mean like a less hostile version, like a less like overusing of their influence? Because IBM was known for playing hard.
Yeah, I mean like the purest, the best idea of what IBM should have been, right? Although I will say it's interesting that you mentioned Lucent, because Lucent like died amid accounting scandals, right? Like,
yeah. That's true.
Maybe not the same thing, if you think about it.
I have a visual guide to the history of IBM linked in the show notes. If you go to coder.show/305, you will find that. And I also have the entire Computer Chronicles 1985 broadcast linked in there, which the whole episode is a profile of Big Blue, sort of during its peak PC industry influence, which is a fascinating time to take a snapshot and then to look back at it now. Yeah, so that's all in there, and also a link to the New York Times when when the U.S. government dropped its antitrust suit against IBM, which the federal government said they no longer dominate the computer business, but the rest of the industry didn't necessarily agree, and there was quite a bit of controversy about it back then. And it's also interesting that, we think of the Watson machine now, that big, huge chest-destroying IBM mainframe. Well, it's not just Sherlock Holmes's right-hand man. Thomas J. Watson ran the company when it was still called Computing Tabulating Record Company to IBM. He ran it from 1874 to 1956. I think, I'm not sure exactly his time frame, but he ran it he ran it for quite a while. As his name was Watson, so the Watson project we hear about now may actually, I guess, be a reference to him and not the Sherlock Holmes reference that I always thought it was, which is kind of neat, just a little bit of history. And they've been around for so long. They've seen so much. And of course, they don't necessarily have the best history either. They sort of have a famous dark aspect to their history when it came to those punch machines. But now they're in the cloud. Now they're a business technology company and a cloud company. And Lotus is still around. I don't know what to make of any of it, Mr. Dominic. But I do know what to make of Linux Academy. Let's go to Linux Academy, and then we'll get to the hoopla of this week. There's a great promo going on. It's a new release over at Linux Academy. Go to linuxacademy.com/coders. They have 70 new courses, challenges, and learning activities coming out in the month of April. Linux Academy is a full-featured training library with everything you need to learn new skills and advance your career. linuxacademy.com/coders. This one does have an S. There you can sign up for a free 7-day trial and try out the platform. Pick a time frame, set a course, and stick to it. They'll build learning goals and help you. Along the way, you can try out their hands-on labs that give you scenario-based learning. They have video courses on every self-paced, in-depth topic you might want to learn about. They have flashcards, which are forked by the community to help you study. They have learning paths, which are a series of courses and content planned by instructors for specific career tracks. And if you want to get certifications, they've got courses created specifically to prepare you for those as well. They've got iOS and Android apps, study tools, lesson audio, study books that you can download and use offline, practice exams and quizzes, and those labs I mentioned that will spin them up on demand. If you ever get stuck, they got a human being to help you along the way. With 70 new courses, challenges, and learning activities, it's never been a better time to try out Linux Academy with a 7-day free trial. linuxacademy.com/coders. 20 new courses, 50 new cloud assessments, hands-on learning activities, and new challenges are all coming this month to Linux Academy. linuxacademy.com/coders. And a big thank you to Linux Academy for sponsoring the Coder Radio program. linuxacademy.com/coders. So let's talk about our workflow. This is a topic that we keep revisiting every single time we think we're done. And then it keeps coming back. And it just is not getting fixed. And it's getting very frustrating for me, as you can probably tell. Since the last time we talked about this, the last time we really talked about this was when the rumors were going around that Apple might ship ARM processors in the Macs. Now we've gotten new news that the Mac Pro is going to be delayed until 2019. That they've hired a pro workflow team to pretend to do work so that way Apple can analyze how they work. And they brought down TechCrunch's Panzerino to do a one-on-one interview to kind of just get an update on where things are at. And it looks like there's not much news for the Mac Pro other than it's going to be later and we're still at the drawing board. But this pro team that they've hired, which is a group of producers and editors and content creators that are shooting real-world projects at Apple and then trying to edit them on Apple Gear with developers sitting over their shoulders going, oh, what do you think about when that happens? How do you feel when that happens? How can we do this better? And trying to find frustration points to influence the design of the Mac Pro. In other words, Mike, your computer woes aren't solved. You're going to continue to have to wait and see. Oh, we did get news that they are absolutely definitely working on a new monitor. So that's going to be coming as well.
Happy right now.
And so this totally comes out right after the ARM's news, and there's no way this thing's going to be Intel. It's supposed to ship in 2019. So I think we can just put the ARM discussion aside and just focus on this part.
Yeah. So you know what this tells me, Chris? And it's interesting because I've listened to a lot of takes on this, and my response was completely different.
Okay.
Mine was the Mac Pro is not for me.
I would perhaps too boldly say this wasn't a machine for you with the price tag. If the iMac Pro starting at $5,000, this thing's probably starting at $7,000 or $8,000, possibly. I think my take on it was also a little bit different than the other takes. My take on it was, holy shit, Apple really doesn't know how to build a computer anymore. Like everybody's always talked about when Steve Jobs died, Apple lost their way. I think it's more like the recent talent drain they've had lower in the ranks that has gotten some coverage. There's been some well-known ones, like Mr. Skeuomorphic, when he left, Scott Forstall. That was, I think, one of their massive technical assets that truly understood the hardware and the operating system. He was gone, and he was a power user. And I think over the years, they've had power users leaving Apple. And I just don't think there's a really super strong computer enthusiast in the company that's in a position to influence product design.
Now, come on.
You don't need to hire these $1 million a year editors and producers to find out that you just need to create another version of the Mac Pro Tower. I think they don't know. Like the fact that they didn't see.
How could they not know though? Right? Like there are people who are obviously tech enthusiasts.
I think it's a group of out of touch old white men that are running it. Look at the people who come out on stage.
I don't know, dude.
Phil Schiller, Tim Cook. They're all.
Yeah, but if they're old white guys, if that's going to be the thing we use, they're us or older, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're slightly older than me, but like there are rough generation. So their idea of a computer should be very similar to what I mean.
But they're so out of touch. They've been running Apple. They haven't probably gone to the Dell website and looked at how you configure a Dell or anything like that in years. I guess I'm not trying to say it's because they're old white guys. I'm saying it's because they are people that have just gotten out of touch over the years by being Apple executives running the company and not looking at PCs.
I don't think you're making like some weird social like issue here. But first of all, like if you're a business like Apple, the idea that you're not going to look at your main competitors seems crazy. Of course, they probably go very regularly to Dell.com and play with the configurator and see what Dell's offering.
Oh yeah.
Right?
No, I think I think the issue is the leadership though doesn't understand why you might want more GPU power over CPU power. I don't think they grok the concepts, and that's how we got the trash can.
It's funny. I see completely differently. I don't think they grok the concept of why upgrading RAM at the user level is important. Right.
When do you suppose the last time Craig Federighi or Tim Cook or Phil Schiller has upgraded the RAM in a laptop? Maybe never. Maybe 10 years.
Probably never.
See, they don't live that world. They don't understand it. I think they really for a long time thought the iPad was going to do it for a lot of people, and so
I think they did too.
Yeah,
like. I mean, it's obvious when they had the original Mac Pro Summit that they were shocked that people didn't think the iMac Pro was the right answer. Right? Like, which in reality, it probably is for a lot of people, right? But I don't know, man. This whole thing of them being out of touch feels kind of like, there's nothing stopping them from making the device you and I want. Like, let's just have a little bit of self-awareness here. Are we just out of touch, right?
No. I mean, I think it's pretty clear in the product. They've been the failure of the trash can, and the inability for them to recognize still the limitations of the iMac Pro. The iMac Pro is being lauded right now in this conversation as it's great. It's going to be more than what most people need. But in reality, the iMac Pro still suffers from thermal limiting. There is not currently a Mac in production that does not suffer from thermal throttling when you push it. That is embarrassing. None of them are sufficiently cooled because of design compromises. And when I'm pushing my MacBook trying to encode a video and I know that the CPU is being downclocked so that way it doesn't reach thermal thresholds, it's like, what did I pay all this money for? That's embarrassing. And they just don't get these concepts. They don't understand why USB-C isn't enough. Why even though only some people have an SD card reader need, that they should put it on every model. Like, they just haven't lived that. And so they think the solution is to bring these pro people in and hire these yes men to tell them what they should be building. But that,
well, it is interesting the people they've brought in, right? They haven't brought in people who are going to be critical, which I get it. You don't want to pay people to insult you, but like hiring a Chris Fisher would have been an interesting look at it, right? Saying, you know what, guys, I'm an IT admin and I'm a video podcast producer, and I have a budget, so I would like because I think you and I effectively want the same thing, but you would lean on GPU, and I would like to buy like the cheapest model, but be able to upgrade it for 5 years, right? Like,
yeah, I think if I could have if Steve and Johnny came to me, or if Tim and Johnny came to me and said, "What do you want?" I would say, take the Mac Pro cheese grater tower and sell it at a base of the cheapest you can sell it, 1 CPU, 16 gigs of RAM, 1 SSD drive.
Sure.
And then let me
add to it later.
Yeah, 6 months I'll throw 4 drives in, and then in 6 months after that I'll throw.
Okay, but I have that on my desk here.
Yeah, well,
it's a Dell Optiplex 7050, right? Like, is it possible that you, me, and like John Syracuse and everybody bitching about Apple's like quote unquote abandonment of Mac Pros is just wrong? Well, not wrong in like that we're wrong technically, but wrong in that
we should be using Windows.
Well, right. Apple's not making a mistake. Apple's just choosing not to serve you.
So that's my option. So there's just a couple of specifically Adobe applications. Ironically, Photoshop isn't really one of them, that I need a platform to run, and they're the latest Creative Cloud versions. I'm not going to run like version 7 of Photoshop, for example. And so if I have to run that, I prefer to run it on a Mac than run it on Windows, because you guys know my history. I'm not a huge fan of using Windows as my work OS and daily driver. I have some Windows systems, and it's fine for what I use it for, and I don't care if other people use it, but it's just not what I want to use. And it's not what I want to have in production 24/7 in my studio either.
Well, because it'll restart 5 times. Oh, geez.
So my options right now are Windows or Mac, and it goes back to that tool thing. Like, these are the tools of my trade, and those are the 2 platforms they run on. I find that infuriating, so I'm constantly spending a lot of my time and energy trying to come up with alternatives on Linux. Constantly. I'm always searching for Linux alternatives. I'm always trying out different projects under Linux. And I mean, I probably burn 4 or 5 hours a week. And it's just, I'm getting really worn out, and I'm starting to lose the faith that I'm ever going to find a solution. So now I just need Apple to figure their shit out, because I don't want to use Windows, and I'm kind of getting to the end of my rope of trying to re-engineer everything on Linux every week. So
right, but that's insane. So you're basically going to like spin your wheels and like just wait for Apple to solve this problem for you.
Well,
what if they decide not to, right?
I think
it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Well, I think even if they build a good Mac Pro, I'm not going to be able to afford it. So I think I have to move on anyways.
Right, exactly. Like, if the iMac Pro starts at $5 grand, you know the Mac Pro is going to be starting at what, 8? Like, and also it's not going to be what you and I want. It is not going to be a black or gray or whatever color tower that you can slot in parts.
It might be like several different takes on the Mac Mini for all we know. You know,
right? It could just be. I'm almost thinking that's what it is. It's just like a super beefed up. I can't remember the name, but what is that NVIDIA machine that recently came out?
You're not thinking of the Intel NUC, are you? You're thinking of the Intel.
Not the NUC, the one after it. Maybe it isn't. It's a
new like a skull something NUC that is.
Yeah,
it's
something
the
dumb
Intel
like that,
latest Intel i7 with an AMD dedicated ish.
Yes.
GPU. Yep. That NUC is, it's funny you say that. That is exactly what my thought process is. If I could move my remaining workflow items over to Linux, then that would be my go-to workstation. It's small, it's interchangeable, it's quiet, it's relatively low cost, it's expandable, it has Thunderbolt. It's everything the Mac Mini should be, but I would use it to run Linux. The issue is, even on Linux, to do my job, all the tools I need are still commercial. They're still proprietary. So I'm not fully...
right, you're not a freedom beard.
Yeah, well, I'm still not even getting... I still can get drug around by the nose horn a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Like I can still kind of. So, and part of me feels like maybe Apple has gotten the smell of fear that they're losing their Pro market, and so they're maybe over the next few years we're going to see some
2019, right? They said 2019.
Yeah, but this Pro team isn't just influencing the Mac Pro. It's going to go into how the MacBook Pro works. And I think the Pro moniker, I think you're going to start seeing. I wouldn't be surprised if you see a mea culpa of some kind on the MacBook Pro, like an SD card reader or a totally revamped keyboard or something like that they say is influenced by the Pro team.
Well, if there was a keyboard, that would be definitely something worth talking about.
I think maybe the bigger meta issue here, though, is to even take it away from Apple and say the meta issue is I have a tool that I depend on, several tools, and the vendor of that platform seems like they've completely stopped.
Yes.
They've lost how to serve me. They don't know how to do it.
Right. So you went to a bar and the bartender doesn't care to serve you.
Yeah.
Right?
They don't carry beer
This is the problem. Right. They just said, you know what, Mike, or you know what, Chris, we only carry, Peruvian amber ale. We don't carry what you want. Right? Like, I made something up.
Yeah.
But like, the Das Uber IPA, right? Like, this is how I feel. And I've been I have bought many Apple machines, both for my businesses and for myself. And I don't know, every time I deal with them, I feel like I'm not their target customer. They're happy to take my money because they're a business, but they just don't make, every machine I buy from them is very expensive and is deeply compromised, whether it's the MacBook Pro's keyboard, which is, in my opinion, basically unusable. And by the way, another great bug I found in my $3,000 MacBook Pro, HDMI doesn't work.
What?
Very well. It's unreliable. You plug it in. You have to unplug it, replug it.
No, Macs are supposed to just work, dude. You're fine. You're fine. You probably
it doesn't work.
No, you're.
And then I looked it up, and it's it's because of the interchange between USB-C. I have the Apple official Belkin adapter.
Yeah,
that costs $70.
Yeah, that
and it's just a bug in the OS for HDMI. Right? There's a bug with HDMI.
Well, I mean, on the flip side, on Linux, you just have nobody's even bothered to write that support yet.
Nothing's up to res, and it looks like shit on my 4K.
And on Windows, it's just going to be fixed in the next driver release. We swear, we promise. Just update next. It'll be fixed. We swear, we promise, and it never gets fixed.
I'm going to push back on that, though. So running my Dell on Windows 10, which I've been doing I'm going to be doing quite a lot, actually. Everything just works. I can't believe I'm saying that about Windows, but...
What, dude? No.
It just works. Yeah, it does. I have more day-to-day problems now running my MacBook Pro, which I am trying to do in clamshell mode over HDMI, which people say, oh, well, you should get a DPI, what is it, DPI? DVI. You should get a mini DVI adapter to Thunderbolt, and you should buy the special licensed one. And but I'm not buying 20 adapters. Right? I paid $70 for an HDMI adapter. I think it ought to work. I'm sorry, but so this is the error case. If the laptop goes into suspension or falls asleep because I got up to take a phone call and it resumes, wakes up, it sometimes won't notice the HDMI adapter. Then you have to restart the machine, plug it in, unplug it to get it to pick up the HDMI. And sometimes it doesn't work.
I have hit a bug on my editing MacBook where I'll be working on a project, I'll close the lid, I'll arrive at the studio, I plug in my single Thunderbolt 3 cable, which provides power, video, networking, etc., USB. I plug that in, open the lid up, and the screen, I have a mouse cursor, but both screens are red, bright red.
Oh, shit.
And the only thing I can do is power off the MacBook and power it back on.
Well, and all these compromises are in the name of what? Thinness?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and innovation, and the OS is stagnated in terms of stability. And supposedly, but again, they're turning around on all of that. It really, the thing is I have weird ass issues on Linux sometimes too. I
do too. My Galago Pro does strange military plane lifting off in my lap things all the time.
So I would be willing to bet if you stuck around on Windows 10 for 6 months, issues will start to crop up. Because in my experience in all of these systems, the first couple of weeks tend to be the golden weeks. You have, not only is it something fresh and new, so that's kind of nice, but then you don't have the cruft and all this crap that just eventually starts causing problems. I don't even know how to explain it.
All right, so can I take a swing here?
Go for it.
Would you agree with the statement that OS stability and quality has just gone down over the years?
Yeah, I was just saying that yesterday, actually. I was just having kind of an off-the-air conversation with Joe about how it's totally feels like it's gone downhill. Like, I thought by now all of these little weird things would be worked out. I thought by now, like, we would have like fought the good fight and we would have figured this stuff out. But we still have video issues. You know? What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, I think it's kind of a shit show, to be honest. I think Apple doesn't know what they're doing. I think you might be right. They may do a mea culpa and change their mind. I think they really wanted to converge macOS and iOS, and that's maybe becoming hard for them, right?
Yeah. Or they're about to do it. They're hitting
I think
reset.
Windows has the opposite problem, where they're so obsessed with legacy that they can't, like, you know, high DPI up some of the control panel stuff. Linux is doing too many things at once to really get anything done, right? Which is a problem for.
Well, and you got to figure it must have a super high churn rate compared to other long-term operating system projects, because you've got people that are, you know, contributing while they work at Intel for a few years, and then they go over to Samsung, and, and then you have people whose passions burn out. I think you're right. To summarize it, I would say Mac OS is suffering from a lack of attention and focus from Apple and proper prioritization, and so that platform has suffered. Windows suffers from a long legacy of technical debt and a super deep spaghetti code infrastructure, and honestly, you know, just team bureaucracy where different things get prioritized different ways and different things are broken out with different levels of funding. That's Windows. And then on Linux, I think what you have is a bunch of shallow developers who don't go super deep on a lot of stuff. A lot of them want to work on big core foundational problems, but those cause burnout and they don't solve the last 10% of user polish problems that we constantly run into. And so each platform has its own particular toxic eroding of its what should be better stability, should be better performance, should be more reliable. But these toxic natures to all of them have, I think, sort of prevented that. And I do feel like long term, hopefully open source would be better because it can just slowly iterate with no need to ever generate revenue. So in theory, that would be best long term, but we so often reset and we have so much apparent development churn. I'm not sure if we'll
I just want to say, like, Wayland, right? Like, that entire nightmare.
Yeah, it's been basically in the works for 10 years. And it's, you know, just now shipping as default on a couple of distros. And Ubuntu is actually rolling it back for their 1804 release. So, you know, what we really want at the end of the day is we want a nice system that is almost got to be top of the line. You might have to pay premium and it just comes and it works. Like you've tried to now order non-Macs and other systems, even Dell systems, and they've completely blown up in your face. Like we're not there yet either. So the hardware side of this is a bit of a shit show too, because the whole hardware industry has been obsessed with mobile now for 9 years.
Well, the whole hardware side is nobody's making money.
Yeah, right? That too. Yeah.
Just a problem. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you would think that there was a space for a vendor to come in and say, we have good machines with high quality components and a stable operating system for you to just get your work done, right? It's just not the case, though. Like, you're right, Windows after a couple months generally becomes a freaking nightmare, right? Running Windows after, 6 months is really not fun.
Yeah, bit rot tends to set in and things, just...
Right.
And what you really start to notice with Windows is like how many different installers are there? There's so many different install wizards, and some of them still want to install a system tray app to like check for updates to the installer. Like that's still a thing on Windows, this mismatch of installation methods and all of it. It's just, there's a real legacy there that it eventually does catch up to you. I don't know. That's why I've been trying to make the Plasma desktop work, to be honest with you, because being able to mix and match my OS, my desktop environment, and my hardware seems to be the only long-term solution. But like I said, I spend a lot of time trying to make that work, and it's still not successful. But that's why I keep spending time every week, at least taking a crack at a segment or at a show. Like right now, I'm trying to learn this editor called Reaper, which they don't even want to admit is available for Linux. They make it available for the Mac and for Windows, and they make a Linux build. But you got to go through like this double duck blind this system to get a download link so you can try out a beta version of their editor for Linux. And it's like, well, how long is this going to stick around? And can I even count on that? So
Right.
I feel like in a lot of ways, 2018, we've talked a lot around this issue and about this issue, but it's getting worse. And it's been getting worse since about 2015, I feel like. 2014, it's just started getting shittier and shittier. And maybe with this Pro work group and this 2019 Mac Pro announcement, you're starting to see Apple turn it around, because I'll give them this. I'd rather they delay it and get it right than screw it up and do another trash can, you know? So...
See, this is my problem, though. I don't think the issue is like they don't know how to do it. I think it's just like philosophically not something they want to do.
Is anything they've done before? Basically, since they've done a tower, they'll never do it again because they've already done it.
Well, it's more that like they see that as a commodity business, right? Where like if you can slot in parts off the shelf, that, you know, they're not a commodity. They're more of a luxury. They're more of a brand. And it's not a thing they want to compete in. But like I'm tired of waiting, right? Like that's why I'm, you know, looking so closely at Pop OS. I'm looking at Windows 10 because I just need an OS to like do its job, be able to be put on any hardware and get out of my way, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I think this particular problem is beginning to change. I think it's going to start getting a lot better on the Mac side. I really do. I don't know if it's going to be right for me because the hardware just will be out of my league. But, you know, with macOS 10.13.4, they now have official eGPU support for external AMD GPUs. So you can hook up a brand new AMD GPU to a MacBook Pro. That's a huge deal for professionals. The fact that the iMac Pro does at least address a lot of compute needs. I might not want to use it, and I might be a little hurt that it still has thermal throttling, but it's overall a very fast machine, and it seems to be a good value for $5,000 when you include the 5K screen. And so that's a good sign. And so this Mac Pro, you know, it's a ways off, but they may be in the right direction now. I mean, eGPU, Pro Workgroup team, even though I think that's a little weak sauce, iMac Pro, and now delaying the Mac Pro until they can get it right, all kind of indicate that they're starting to take this seriously again. Just might be too little too late. Not to even be cliche or quaint about it, but I think it's just too little too late. And I think that's just the reality of it, is there's going to be other categories of machines now that at different price points. And maybe, you know what, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe in a few weeks, if you're still on Windows 10, you'll think it's great. And then maybe this won't be an issue for you anymore, but I doubt it. Shall see. The Coder Radio, It's like we're stuck in a Coder Radio. Did you ever see that episode of TNG where they just kept getting in a loop over and over again because they were crashing into Fraser's ship, and then they just kept...
Right. Yes.
Yeah, this is what's happening to us here. So really quickly, before we leave, I'm going to point you to an article that you'll find in the show notes at coder.show/305. And I think this is really kind of interesting compared to what keeping in mind what we talked about last week. And it's an article that is kind of legitimate. It's the science of breaking out of your comfort zone. Now, I read through this whole thing, and I found a few areas in here that I think are particularly good. And if you're stuck on an idea or a project right now, this might be exactly what you need. This is something I have found helps me a lot. And you know, if you're reeling from a recent failure or a setback, and you need to get new, fresh perspective, I really encourage that you go read The Science of Breaking Out of Your Comfort Zone. You know, really, if you think about it. Our brains are engineered to seek out comfort zones because it minimizes stress. There's patterns and routines that you can recognize. It gives you a state of mental security, but it also can kind of kill new ideas. It prevents you from seeing the big picture. So the idea of this article is to give you a few tools to potentially break out so you can maybe be more productive. You'll have potentially an easier time dealing with new and unexpected changes. I know it all sounds really hippie and foo-fooey, but it works. And I thought it was sort of a nice sort of conclusion to what we talked about last week. And it is a life hacker article, but I think you would find it useful. So take a look. We'll have that over at the show notes. Mr. Dominic, is there anything else we want to talk about this week before we get the snot out of here?
Sounds good. Follow me at Dumanuko on Twitter.
Boom! At Dumanuko on Twitter. You can follow the whole dang network at Jupiter Signal. You can follow me. I'm at Chris LAS. And like I said earlier, we have that new show website, which means we also have a new show feed. So you can go to coder.show/RSS to get that new feed, coder.show/RSS. Or if you just want easy links, coder.show/subscribe. We also have the subreddit. You can always participate in that. And we'd love to get your emails, coder.show/contact. It's a lot of URLs I'm throwing at your face, but I believe in you. I have faith that you can remember them, or at least remember one of them. You can also join us live. We tend to do this show on Mondays, and that URL is jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar for the time. Thank you so much for tuning this week's episode of the Coder Radio program. I hope you join us right back here. We do this show every single week, and you can count on at least more insightful and deep commentary from Jar Jar Binks.